Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen, round 8. How crazy is that? Welcome to the Kansas City Chiefs versus Buffalo Bills full statistical breakdown. If you've never been to one of these before, welcome. My name is Max. I do one of these for every primetime game, as well as the two biggest games on Sunday to give you the best information for your fantasy teams, as well as your higher or lower projections. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, especially if you enjoy content like this. And if you do enjoy content like this, like the video. Lets me know you like it. Lets me know you want more of it. But without further ado, we're going to get into the coverage data and run scheme data for these two teams. Now, if you've never seen a coverage matrix before, which is what we're going to start with, I'll explain it to you very, very briefly. So every single team plays man coverage, zone coverage to some extent. It adds up to about 100% based on how much you blitz, but some teams play man coverage more and zone coverage more. What you can do is get a better understanding of how quarterbacks do against those coverages, as well as what type of receiver production you can get on the outside, on the inside, and we'll look at some target rates to help with that. But we got to see how these defenses play coverage against each other. Now, we're going to start with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs are the 6th highest man coverage team in the NFL, 36.6% man coverage, which is very interesting to note because that leans two ways when you look at player projections. Number one, it's quarterback rushing production. A lot of times when plays break down, big lanes open up for quarterbacks to take off because all DBs are attached to a man on the outside, in the slot, whatever it may be. They're all attached to these different men across the board. Josh Allen, in this case against Kansas City Chiefs, could rip off a big run because of that. You look at their zone percentage, it's 38.7%, excuse me. It's the third fewest in the NFL. So Chiefs are going to play a lot of man, not a ton of zone, which is very interesting because it's not the traditional Steve Spagnuolo defense. He does a lot of different things, but we got to look at how quarterbacks, really Josh Allen, do against man coverage. And it's very interesting because you see the big difference here in terms of overall fantasy points. Josh Allen, the second best quarterback in the entire NFL against man coverage. Look at that zone number, though. Look at that zone number. Josh Allen is down here. It's Josh Allen with guys like Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers. Look at Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold. Not the best quarterbacks against zone coverage in terms of overall fantasy points, right? This is just fantasy production, not overall production. But Josh Allen, a lot better against man than he is against zone. Now, when you're talking about passing the ball outside of that rushing production, we have to look at where players are being targeted as well. Now, obviously no Keon Coleman and obviously no Dalton Kincaid this week. Amari Cooper, optimistic, kind of up in the air, waiting to see what's happening right now, at least at the time of recording this. But when you look at where the Kansas City Chiefs give up their targets, it's a very, very different story. So you look at the Chiefs out wide, 31st in the NFL. Only 34.2% of targets are going to the outside. You look at the team below, and we'll talk about them in a few minutes, Buffalo Bills. They also don't allow a lot of targets out wide. The slot targets for the Kansas City Chiefs, though, second highest in the NFL. And you see number 7 right here. It tells the story. Both these teams, but especially the Buffalo Bills, are going to attack the slot. Now, when you talk about inline target rate and back target rate, Kansas City Chiefs are here at 10. So a good amount of targets go to opposing running backs. But in my opinion, most of that stuff's probably going to come against zone. If you're not going to run a ton of zone, especially against Josh Allen, probably not going to see a ton of receiving production overall for running backs against the Chiefs. And then the 22nd highest, that was inline target, 22nd highest target for the running backs, which we just talked about, against Kansas City Chiefs. So expect less running back production, but in terms of overall matchup for inline targets, you see the 10th highest. That's Dawson Knox in a spot where the Chiefs have actually not been great against tight ends, especially as of late. Overall yardage production, we like Dawson Knox a lot. And I'm going to pull up his yardage projection right now. But if you guys want to make your own predictions on these projections, remember, you can do so on Underdog. I'm going to give you a link below. You can join with code LEADS, LEADS. They're going to give you a deposit bonus up to $1,000. They'll give you a deposit bonus up to $1,000. Yes, $1,000 if you join with code LEADS, LEADS. If you also join with that code, they'll give you a free pick if you're not already on Underdog for CJ Stroud to have at least 1 yard on Monday Night Football. All you have to do is click that link. You can see right here. Justin Herbert says Justin Herbert. We'll refresh this. It'll say CJ Stroud for you. CJ Stroud, half yard on Underdog. You click right there. And if you want to join Sleeper and Better, feel free as well. Same types of deals, a little bit different on each of them, but same idea. They're going to give you free stuff if you join and you're not already on it. But when you look at the projection for Dawson Knox, we'll wait for this to load. That is a guy I'm very fascinated by because, again, no Dalton Kincaid, no Keon Coleman, less opportunities, I think, to pass the ball. I think Josh Allen's going to run the ball a little more. I think James Cook's going to run the ball a little more. But we'll talk about the rush defenses here. Chiefs' run defense is really good. Like, that's the reality of it. Chiefs' run defense is very, very good. They've not allowed a lot of running backs to have significant production all year long. So when I look at this game, I don't know. It truly does seem like a Dawson Knox game. 30 receiving yards, 6.35 fantasy points. Both of those way too low for me. And again, both of those are available on Underdog if you're not already on it. But we can't just completely talk about the coverage aspects of this without looking about the offensive coverage aspects, right? So this is the offensive advanced receiving metrics, how often teams are throwing the ball out wide, in the slot, whatever it may be. So you can see the Buffalo Bills right here, right? 25th in the NFL in terms of out wide throwing. Here's the slot target rate, though. Look at it right here. 7th highest. They're going to throw in the slot. Now, you're probably asking, who is in the slot for the Buffalo Bills? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about some route running metrics. When you look at the Buffalo Bills, as I'm sure you guys can probably imagine if you watch a little bit of football, you know who runs the most amount of routes from the slot for the Bills. It's Khalil Shakir. But here's what's interesting. Dalton Kincaid is out, and he had the second most routes from the slot. Dawson Knox has a higher slot route percentage than a guy like Matt Collins. In my opinion, I think Curtis Samuel will be a little bit more involved. But Dawson Knox is going to take some of those slot routes away from a guy like Dalton Kincaid and have even more opportunities. But I do like Khalil Shakir. You should see plenty of targets. Let's talk rush defense real quick before we move to the Kansas City Chiefs offense against the Buffalo Bills defense. So you look at the overall rush yards a game. You have the Chiefs, third fewest in the NFL overall yards per carry. Chiefs second fewest in the NFL overall attempts. Chiefs third fewest in the NFL. Teams can't run the ball on them. You can't run the ball on them well. But you got to look at the offensive metrics. And again, this is including Josh Allen's rushing production. So it's very, very important to note that this is not just James Cook, but Josh Allen, in terms of overall efficiency, the Buffalo Bills offense, rushing the ball, middle of the pack in terms of yards per carry, but run game's a little bit above average, 120.7. Overall attempts, a little bit above average. They're a pretty balanced attack, and that's what's really interesting to note because Josh Allen can pull the ball and run. They're going to drop back a ton. Especially against this Chiefs defense this week. But Josh Allen has that ability to pull and run the football, and that's the reality anytime you play the Buffalo Bills offense. But this week especially, Josh Allen, even more of a prominent rushing threat. And I don't know how I feel about his yards. It's very interesting to look at that, especially because of what the Kansas City Chiefs have been able to do to opposing quarterbacks this year. But Josh Allen, always a prominent rushing threat, this week especially, in a very good spot. So you look at this Buffalo Bills offense, in conclusion there, they're going to throw in the slot, and the Chiefs are going to allow a lot of targets in the slot. So a guy like Khalil Shakir could have a big game. I love Dawson Knox as a streaming option, especially in fantasy. And I think Josh Allen has a big game this week. The reality is he's playing a defense that's very man-centric. Do they change what they do? Sure, potentially. They could. But he has been dominant against man-centric defenses this year. Almost 0.8 fantasy points per dropback. They're going to drop back a lot. I just said that. They're going to drop back a lot. Doesn't mean they're always going to throw it. He could scramble, but they're going to drop back a lot. 0.8 fantasy points. Second most behind Jared Goff, which is fascinating. Second most in the NFL. Let's talk Kansas City Chiefs offense. But before we do, you guys remember, we got to look at the coverage matrix for the the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills are a very zone-centric team. You don't really need me to tell you that, but they blitz a lot. And that's the very, very interesting thing here. So 28th fewest man, so fifth fewest man in the NFL, 28th most, 18.7% man coverage. They sit in too high stuff. They sit in cover 2. Zone coverage, 74.3%, which is 73.7%, which is 7th in the NFL. So they're going to play a lot of zone. Now, remember, Patrick Mahomes against zone, not great. Not great. 0.34 fantasy points per stat per drop back against zone. And then against man, he's a little bit better. 0.54 fantasy points per game. But I'm very fascinated to see, and we're going to do this together. What have those numbers looked like with DeAndre Hopkins? Because this offense has been a lot better with DeAndre Hopkins in it. So the last 3 weeks with DeAndre Hopkins, fantasy points for dropback for Patrick Mahomes. Let's find this. Wow. Less. Interesting. So less fantasy points per dropback for Patrick Mahomes overall, even though the offense overall has seen more production. Very interesting to note. The offense has been better, but less fantasy points per dropback for Patrick Mahomes. He's dropping back, throwing the football more. They're throwing the football more. That's kind of the reality of it with DeAndre Hopkins now. But Overall efficiency, less fantasy points per dropback, less efficient against these coverages, but still putting up more fantasy points because he's dropping back more. They're throwing the football more. Now, the Buffalo Bills target share, we just talked about it. Advanced receiving defense. They don't allow targets out wide. They do not allow targets out wide. They allow the fewest targets out wide in the NFL. But the slot stuff, we just talked about it. 35.2% inline target. 10%, not that much, but here's the kicker, guys. And this is my favorite prediction of the week, I think. 22.7% of opposing targets go to running backs against the Buffalo Bills. It's because they sit in zone so much, right? Kareem Hunt, receiving. But I want to go look at this. Go look at this rush defense for the Buffalo Bills because I think it's a little bit overhyped, guys. I think it's a little bit overhyped. You look at the Buffalo Bills rush defense. This is rush defense right here. 123.2 yards per game. It's technically a little bit below average, but look at the efficiency numbers. 4.87 yards per carry. That's the third most in the NFL. Teams are often trailing against the Buffalo Bills. They have to abandon the run. In a game where I think it's going to be a little bit close, I don't think the Chiefs are going to wind up doing that, guys. I don't think the Chiefs are going to wind up abandoning the run against this Buffalo Bills defense. And they've been running the ball very efficiently with Kareem Hunt. They've been running the ball really well. He's kind of had a really good year, to be honest with you guys. He's looked really good. Him on the ground, coupled with that potential receiving production, his projection for scrimmage yards is 78 scrimmage yards. That is my favorite pick of the weekend. My favorite pick of the weekend by far. 78 plus scrimmage yards for Kareem Hunt against his Buffalo Bills defense. Now, interesting to note with the Chiefs offense, the rushing data, right? They are winning a lot of games, so they're going to be running the football more, which is interesting to note. So Kansas City Chiefs, rush yards per game, 115.1, so not great. Efficiency, 3.81, really bad. But the attempts are much lower than a lot of other teams are. So they're running the football more in the red zone. They're running the football less overall in a game, again, where it's going to be close. They're not going to have to abandon the run. I trust this team to be able to give the ball to Kareem Hunt enough. I think they have enough of an edge on the ground as well to give the ball to Kareem Hunt to really ground and pound and beat this Bills offense. But the pass offense with the Kansas City Chiefs, it's going to have to go through Kareem Hunt. As wild as that sounds, it's going to have to go through Kareem Hunt and in the slot. So we pull up these slot numbers. I want to look at the overall percentages because DeAndre Hopkins has run less routes overall. But in his 3 weeks of playing, the route distribution looks like this. Let's wait for this to load. Come on now. Here we go. The route distribution looks like this. So Travis Kelce, 45.3% of his routes from the slot, 53 routes overall from the slot. It makes sense. Travis Kelce is going to run routes from a lot of different places. But look at this. DeAndre Hopkins, even though he's running more routes out wide, 48 routes out wide compared to 26 routes in the slot, he is running technically the second most routes in the slot on the Kansas City Chiefs in his 3 weeks that he's been playing here, right? Mecole Hardman technically has a higher percentage at 14 routes. So when Hardman's in, he'll slide inside. Hopkins will slide outside. But nobody else is really touching this guy. Like even Xavier Worthy, right? More routes overall. He's on the field a little bit more. But percentages, DeAndre Hopkins, 3 full percentage points higher. Justin Watson, 4 full percentage points higher. DeAndre Hopkins is running a decent amount of routes from the slot. And you look at the last 2 weeks because, the first week DeAndre Hopkins played, he didn't play as much. That was that Raiders game, his first game. He caught 2 catches, I believe, on the opening drive, but 2 catches in the first quarter. And they kind of pushed him out. It was his first game on the Kansas City Chiefs. It was a fast turnaround. But look at this. His 2 games in Kansas City, 40% of his routes from the slot. Almost as many as Xavier Worthy, 4 more than Justin Watson. Obviously, Travis Kelce is going to be the main slot guy. I still do think DeAndre Hopkins is in for a good game. You look at the red matchup against the Buffalo Bills defense for your fantasy wide receivers. Take it with a grain of salt because the way DeAndre Hopkins runs routes and where he runs routes from, this matchup is not as bad as it seems. It's not as bad as it seems. The only thing that does worry me is the targets per route run. Like 0.17 targets per route run is not great, but look at the yards per route run. Almost 3 full yards per route run from the slot. Almost 3. That's more from out wide. That's more than Travis Kelce from the slot. It's more than anybody from the slot. It's actually more than anybody on the Kansas City Chiefs overall running routes anywhere. DeAndre Hopkins, even though you look at the red matchup on your ESPN fantasy app, he has a great matchup based on his slot production. Not saying he's a must start in fantasy. Not saying he's this absolute world beater that you need to get into your lineup or you need to put over on his projections or higher on his projections, But the matchup's a lot better than it seems, guys. Looking at this game, I think it's going to have to be a pass fest, especially from the Buffalo Bills. I don't think they're going to have a ton of success on the ground. They're going to have to throw the ball. On the Kansas City Chiefs side, though, look, I think the Bills are a good team. I think the Bills can move the football down the field pretty much at will. I'm fascinated to see what happens when they go up against a very good run defense. But I think the Chiefs' offense will have their way. I really do. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to be great. I think Kareem Hunt is going to be able to run the ball really effectively against this Bills defense that struggled on the ground. I really do think this is the Chiefs' game to lose. And I know you look at this Chiefs 9-0 team now, and you're like, this is the worst 9-0 team ever. Number one, I don't think it is. I think that's an overreaction. I think that stems from us hating, not even us. I don't even hate the Chiefs. I think that stems from a lot of people hating the Chiefs publicly. This team's looking better offensively with DeAndre Hopkins. Very, very good defense. You don't need me to tell you that. I think this is the Chiefs' game to lose. I think it's going to be a very, very good game, but I think Kansas City Chiefs take this one. Let me know your score predictions in the comments. I appreciate you guys hopping on and watching this full breakdown. Again, if you're new, you like videos like this, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like this video and send this to a friend who may need to hear some of this information before kickoff at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. We'll see you guys next time tomorrow for the Monday Night Football breakdown between the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys. And believe it or not, CeeDee Lamb was added to the injury report today. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. God bless you guys, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for hopping on.